they come out with a flimsy excuse by saying it's the fabric of the union, the law. We know. We've been outside the law for 12 months. The law says we must...
This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and have covered this struggle in the Teamsters Union, what's going on with automation, AI, and the attack on Teamsters and other transportation workers. And joining us today is John Palmer. He's a Vice President at Large of the Teamsters Union and has been fighting for democracy, membership control, and dealing with some of these issues for many years. So welcome to our show, John.
Good to be here, Steve.
So we're talking today with chaos in the airline industry. FAA workers are being attacked by Trump, saying they should be showing up to work even though they're not being paid. There's a danger of health and safety in the airlines. They're stressed out, and he's fired meteorologists. It sounds like he's disassembling the government. Scientists, all kinds of public workers are under attack. He broke the contracts of the over 700,000 federal workers. What does this mean for working people in this country? It seems like there's a open assault, and the whole crisis in the airline industry is the destruction of the airline industry that's going on in front of our faces.
Well, I think it's pretty serious when you look at the personal safety and well-being of the traveling public, and to your earlier discussion about firing 700,000. They didn't really fire 700,000. Maybe I misstated that, but
it took away their
bargaining rights away from those folks. So their right to representation, their right to just cause, just evaporated into thin air. He was pretty clear about what he intended to do in Project 2025, which he's running the playbook, as expected. So, to take on that many people and strip them of their bargaining rights is sick. Back to the safety issue, it's paramount to the economy and well-being of our country that these things are intact and in place, and all these agencies are being stripped of people who are there not because they're political tools or figures. That they were there because they were public servants trying to do the right thing, trying to maintain the things that protect our food safety, our water safety, airline safety, highway safety, just about everything that affects us in everyday life. And to turn it in, hiring political hacks who are not qualified, who shouldn't be doing the jobs they're doing because they're clearly not trained or qualified to do it, is a very risky approach.
And also you have a situation where you have a trade war, which is affecting workers in this country, airline workers, for example, people don't want to travel to the United States. That's affecting airline workers in the tourist industry. There are large numbers of workers who are Teamster tourist hotels and others. This isolationism of the United States, basically, the United States is going to do what it wants, to hell with the rest of the world, even Canada and Mexico. People from Canada don't want to come to the United States. I mean, what effect is that having on working people in the United States?
Well, I think we can see it already. A lot of the numbers, economic numbers, are starting to show that the economy is slowing down, job growth is slowing down, inflation's still intact. And then you take on issues with trade between, I think particularly when you look at what the whole Canadian American economy, the closeness of the two economies and the automobile industry, that it's really important to both sides of the border. And I find the silence by General President Sean O'Brien shocking, because all of this, the commerce and trade, affects Teamsters as well as, on both sides of the border, Canadian Teamsters, American Teamsters. And then let's just talk about the broader labor movement. The obvious thing with that, with the car industry, would be the UAW. So, just why are we doing this to ourselves? It's hard to understand why we're doing this. I know that the Supreme Court heard arguments the other day. I sat through it, on my way to the airport and listened to those arguments. It didn't sound like he was catching much water with the court on his ability to impose these tariffs. But the real problem here is, even if the court rules against him, this guy's doing what he wants to do. I mean, I don't think any of us could have imagined what we've seen happen 10 months into this thing. It's 10 months. It's unbelievable.
And has there been any discussion in the Teamsters Union? And Teamsters Union is not the only one that's supporting the trade war. Sean Fain of the UAW is also supporting the trade war, uh, about the effect on the members of the Teamsters. I mean, it seems like this is a serious issue. If hotel workers, if airline workers, if food processing workers are being affected, you would think that there'd be some discussion. We're being hurt by these policies. They're hurting Teamsters. They're hurting workers.
I think there should be discussion. I've tried to bring it up many times with my peers at the General Executive Board, but um, it's just sad to see what goes on in those meetings, and the fact that no one seems to have a voice. And I guess it's emblematic of what needs to happen to our labor unions. They need to quit being boardrooms and start being places where people that represent members stand up and fight for their rights and their families. I guess drawing multiple salaries is more important than really standing up and representing your membership. And a really troubling part of most of this is O'Brien's relationship to Trump, standing on the Capitol stairs and amongst those folks and calling out politicians of all stripes, telling them to get us back to work.
He's attacking the air traffic controllers as if they're the problem.
Right.
He's having balls. He's tearing down the part of the White House to have a ballroom. He's partying in Mar-a-Lago, and then he's telling these air traffic controllers who can't even pay their bills, can't take care of their child care, you get back to work. Like, I mean, I think the fascists who went to Michigan, the state capital, to protest against the Democrats and in favor of Trump, were saying, get back to work. Get back to work. Don't fight. Don't organize. Just go back to work. Do your job.
Right.
That sounds like the same line that Trump has now against the air traffic controllers.
Well, if it sounds like it is because it is, and he's a tool for the current administration, and it's really a shame because at a time when the labor movement should be coming together, we got this guy walking around with a shirt and espousing this concept of Teamsters versus everyone, and running failed strikes, which, faux strikes. That wasn't a strike at Amazon. That was a publicity stunt, which is shameful. If we're going to organize workers, particularly that case, the legal impediments to organizing somebody like Amazon are so massive that we should have the entire support of not only labor but religious, community, environmental, all these different things. And here we are separating ourselves from the labor movement. I don't know how making a deal, for yourself. I haven't seen the immediate benefit in 10 months. I haven't seen anything that we've gained. I've seen a weakened labor board. I've seen Elon Musk prevail in court that that may not even exist by the time it makes it to the Supreme Court. And that beckons a bigger question. What's going to happen if you want to file for an election, if you want to file a labor charge? If there's no labor board, where do you go?
Well, it seems that Sean O'Brien has been very silent. Has he taken a stand against the union busting against federal employees and also basically the attack on all these agencies? He supported this labor secretary who apparently is now saying we should get rid of labor law protection, would deregulate, let it, really attacking any kind of regulations to protect workers. OSHA is under attack. They're cut back on staffing. Let it rip. It seems like companies now have a free hand to do what they want. And as you say, if there's no NLRB, how are unions going to enforce their contracts? Because in the past, they've gone to the NLRB to get redress of their grievances. If the employers are now saying, the bosses are saying, screw you, you're on your own, that puts a very different, shade on what's going to be happening in this country.
Yeah, the silence is, equivalent to screaming in a sense that you've allied yourself with one of the most fascist, anti-worker, not one of the absolute most fascist anti-worker president of all time. And I did want to talk about the union busting aspect of this, and I just for a minute want to say how despicable it is when union bust their own workers. And Sean O'Brien union busted his organizers recently, just like Jim Hoffa did. And I don't care what your name is or who supports you, whatever. You don't be a hypocrite. I mean, if your organizers are asking to organize, it's because there's a problem in your organizing department. There's no reason to union bust them. Give them a contract, take care of them, and make them happy. How are you going to go talk to somebody about becoming a union member when somebody told you as firing people who are trying to actively organize? And there were multiple people fired. So it just says something about his character. It says a lot about, and look, it's not unique to the Teamsters. Most labor unions do not want their workforce organized, which is, total hypocrisy. And we shouldn't, there should be no respect for anyone that behaves that way in the labor movement.
And the issue of the trade war, going back to the loss of jobs, I mean, one of the problems for the United States now is it can't compete with China. It can't compete with other countries, and you put up tariffs to try to protect yourself. But one of the reasons for the lack of competitiveness is the deindustrialization, NAFTA, corporations, billionaires shipping their jobs to the South, then Mexico, then Asia. Wasn't the fault of the Chinese that billions of dollars in investment from the United States were going into China? Companies here wanted to make more profits with slave labor conditions in China. So it seems that this whole crisis now of blaming other countries for a system crisis, is really at the center of this, and it could lead to a world depression, could lead to military war. The United States now while it's cutting back on social services and healthcare and telling people they can't afford healthcare, they're spending trillions on war. They may attack Venezuela. I mean, it seems like the United States is going towards war and not towards taking care of the needs of working people in this country.
It's absolutely, the working class versus the ruling class, and the business class in this country. And if you want to look at the situation, it's been decades in the making. And you can finger point it at one party or the other. I think they're both. If you want to finger point, it's going to take two fingers, because both of these parties have participated in what's allowed the offshoring of the jobs, and created the move of manufacturing completely out of the United States. And I would argue that should have never happened. And then the appropriate time for tariffs there would have been when somebody tried to undercut your products, right? That was the original intent of tariffs. But now that the horse has left the barn, when you do it, now we're supposed to be building manufacturing in this country, which is on a very slow pace. And given the best of circumstances, it takes years to retool and build this kind of manufacturing. So what applied 40 years ago doesn't apply now. And like you said, the damage we're doing to the economy. Look, I live in Texas, and I've had to put a brisket or two on my barbecue pit for them to, try to get us to buy Venezuelan beef. I find it, totally offensive.
Argentinian beef.
Argentinian, thank you. I forgot we're gonna.
It is good. Argentinian.
We're gonna invade Venezuela.
Argentinian beef is good.
Right. We're gonna. Yeah. So yeah, but
well, that's the solution. All solution. Invade a country. You have a problem. Have an invasion. Clinton did that. Have some kind of war to divert people from what's going on with their own families, and it's like healthcare. I mean, people can't afford healthcare, and Trump is now saying that the problem is these blood-sucking insurance companies. But don't the insurance companies control both the Democrats and Republicans?
Absolutely.
It seems like, attacking the insurance companies, they support both political parties.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's the thing. And, sometimes people, we've said this many times, two-party system in this country is totally broken, because you get people arguing back and forth about, stupid crap they see on social media or culture war, and the whole time both of these folks are on the dole, from corporate America. They're not really working in our best interests, and the way it's structured now, they spend all their time raising money. There's too much money in the political system now, and it's only gotten worse. Nobody really stands for anything, honestly. People have to learn. At some point, we're going to have to stand up and fight back. I heard Sean Fain with the call for a national strike. And my response to a lot of people calling for that strike is yes. I want to see this country get to the place where the working class will do that. But the other part of that is we have to work on that. It just doesn't happen magically. But I think the fact that we're talking about it now and people are more and more thinking about it, I think we're headed in that direction. But at some point, it's going to be pitchforks and torches if we don't, if we continue to erode and eradicate the working class.
Well, one of the people who have spoken for a national general strike is Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, with these military raids on the community of the black and brown community, where they had a helicopter land on top of a apartment building and then bust all the homes in that apartment. Fascist tactics, Nazi tactics, and it's happening in Los Angeles. A lot of these communities, they're Teamster members. They're
right.
Teamster members, but it's apparently there's not a word from Sean O'Brien about these kind of fascist military tactics against the working class of this country. Immigrants are workers. Many Teamsters are immigrants. I mean,
a lot of Teamster members, and instead of publicly going on and attacking immigrants and saying that they're taking Americans' jobs, you should be working with the members that you represent, trying to help them. They're doing. I'm going to tell you, I've been in those facilities, particularly the meatpacking facilities in Colorado. Those are jobs that the majority of Americans will not do anymore. The same thing with folks that are, I always think about down here where there's a lot of metal roofing. Think about having to put a long sleeve shirt on, a ski mask, gloves, and put down a metal roof in the middle of the summer. Now, whoever's doing that is doing us a service. And I have the highest respect for anybody that's willing to do that, because by and by, Americans are not doing that.
And those plants are being targeted by ICE. I mean, there's also the issue of the public workers who have come under attack, cut back on public education, research. A lot of public workers are Teamsters, and they're under attack by the federal government, by Trump, who wants to destroy the infrastructure. It's pretty amazing because the United States seems to be being disassembled. Everything that's been built up over decades and decades, education, science, healthcare, to build up a system for research is just being destroyed in front of our faces. It's like, why are you destroying what has made America a very powerful and important country? I mean, scientists are leaving the United States because they want to get away from a system that terrorizes scientists, that mold them into kind of fascist institutions. You've got to agree with Trump and his ideology, or else your job is threatened. Is that a danger of fascism in the future of this country?
Clearly it is. I mean, you look at the universities or public education as well too, right? So the universities, you get people that come here from other countries that are really bright and talented people, right? And in many cases, just like doctors. I don't know if you've tried to find a doctor lately, but you can't find a doctor. You're more than likely going to see a practicing nurse when you go to get checked out at a doctor. We don't have enough doctors, and a large number of those folks are coming from other countries. So when you attack universities and public education, which by and by this move away from public education to vouchers, like we've done in the state of Texas, that's really harsh on the poorest of the poor, right? If you live you're going to give somebody a voucher worth half of the cost of a private school. The only person that benefits from that is a wealthy person that was wealthy enough to pay that to begin with.
And, Trump is talking about $2,000 with the tariffs. He's going to give everybody $2,000. How far will $2,000 get you paying for health care? When you go to the hospital and you have a bill $16,000 a day, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000. I mean, the highest cause of bankruptcy in the United States is healthcare. And the other issue is in Canada, you have Teamsters there who are in Canada. And by the way, the Teamsters in Canada are against the trade war. It's
Right.
destroying the economy of Canada. But in Canada, they have national health care. People don't go bankrupt because they can't get health care. Yet, has the Teamsters ever talked about national health care, single payer, to get rid of the insurance companies? I mean, it's interesting now because Trump and the Republicans, it was amazing watching the Senate. They're attacking the insurance companies. They're saying the insurance companies are ripping us off with Obamacare. But Obamacare accepts private control of the healthcare industry. The money's going to insurance companies because we don't have single payer as they do in Canada, as they do in Korea, as they do in Japan, as they do in Europe. But they don't want to even talk about that.
And that was on the table years ago. The discussion has started. I think the entirety of labor would be, organized and unorganized would be better off with single payer healthcare. And one of the reasons that bargaining a contract in Canada is easier than it is here is you don't have to bargain over healthcare. And the cost of healthcare, sending people money is not a good idea. You're not, and I saw, Trump on the boob tube this morning talking about, well, people will be able to make their choices. No, because one of the benefits of being a union member is union provided health care. And the reason we can provide it at a cheaper cost and at a better value is because we have the purchasing power of numbers. So doing it by yourself, that is a total fallacy. People wind up spending that money and not having health care is what's going to happen. But we're not going to solve a health care problem in this country by not addressing the fraud and the waste. I mean, they always want to talk about fraud and waste. You want to find it, go to the healthcare system. The most, if I'm not wrong, the numbers I saw a year or two ago on Medicare was like 89 to 90 cents of every dollar went to healthcare. That, there's your socialized medicine. It's, and it could be even better if we didn't have all the drug companies and the hospital corporations raping everybody. So we're not really serious about healthcare if we continue talking about ways to bring these corporate pharmaceutical companies and hospital corporations into the mix, because they're capitalists, and the only thing they care about is their stock prices. And I just heard today that 90% of the stock in this country is held by the 1% of the wealthiest people, which many of us may own some stock, but if you stop and think about that, it means the average Joe that owns a 401k isn't going to be able to retire on it. Certainly isn't going to get rich.
And of course, you have a situation where during COVID, Amazon, the billionaires, Bezos, they got richer, and working people were hurting. And you had a situation during COVID where the Tesla workers were told to go to work, even though there was a rampant epidemic there, and other small businesses were being shut down. And Elon Musk said, "I'm even though there's a shelter-in-place order by the Alameda County Department of Health, I'm going to ignore that." And Gavin Newsom didn't do anything about it. Gavin Newsom, who the unions have supported, has been vetoing bills saying that if you have a truck over 10,000 pounds, you should have a driver. He got $10 million from Google. I mean, it seems these Democratic politicians, which the Teamsters and all the unions have been supporting, are basically stabbing unions in the back.
That's fair. It's fair. I mean, absolutely. And the sad part is, in most of our life, given the system we have, we're left with two choices, bad and worse. And but at the end of the day, neither one of them have stood up and advocated for the working class in the way they should, and certainly not the Republicans. I mean, that's the worst. And the Democrats are bad, but we could do better than that. Both these parties have no loyalty to working men and women. That their loyalty is the dollar bill.
And you're saying earlier you're concerned, about the fact that there may be a dictatorship. Trump has called, may have to institute martial law, the Insurrection Act. At this point, more and more people are becoming angry about what's happening as a result of the last election. People see that they're getting screwed. I mean, millions of people are going to lose their health care. Has Sean O'Brien ever said anything about millions of people being without health care and a solution to that?
The only thing I've seen Sean O'Brien say is whatever his Republican puppet masters tell him to say. So he hasn't said a word about any of that. And he's not going to. He's trying to curry political favor with these guys. I'm not even sure what his end game is, to be honest with you. He's not acting like a labor leader. That's for certain.
And these people, I mean, they're both Democrat and Republican. Some of them voted for Trump. A lot of people are angry because their economic situation is declining. Their children can't get jobs. Their children have to live at home. You can't buy a house. You have hedge companies buying homes and increasing prices. It seems like the whole system is squeezing people even more, creating a very volatile situation for working people. And as we know, in the 1930s, when there was a depression, and we may be going into a depression with the speculation with cryptocurrency and all the massive speculation with AI, that it may lead to a depression. But during the 30s, workers did organize. There was a Teamster-led strike in Minneapolis. You don't hear that, I don't think, from Sean O'Brien.
No.
That the main development in the 1930s were Teamsters in Minneapolis having a Teamster general strike that won, fighting the National Guard, fighting the corporations, and that's kind of not in the history of the Teamsters
right.
Union.
I think it's interesting too to know that even then, because of most of the unions, I would say that the Teamsters have probably been one of the most conservative unions traditionally. But even then, the leadership didn't want them to do it, and came in, and after the fact, when it was all said and done, trusteed the local for a while, and I think it disbanded the local for a while. Now it's reestablished, but
that was Daniel Tobin, the international president.
Dan Tobin.
Yeah,
that's right.
They wanted to destroy that local, and that was the local that helped build a successful over-the-road organizing drive.
Right.
Led to the Teamsters becoming as powerful as they were before deregulation.
Exactly right.
And the issue
leadership
go on.
Can be pretty disconnected from the membership, and I think there's a guy out west that was a vice president recently removed, and I've got just a small amount of detail through other sources, but apparently spending unbelievable sums of money on food and wine, and I think that's all going to be coming out. So he's one of Sean's vice presidents.
Well, these triple salaries, I mean, the corruption, endemic corruption,
right?
Not just in government, not just among the capitalists, the billionaires, but within the union movement. It's like a business operation where you get 3 salaries. How many jobs do you need? Why not election to all positions? How about it's a radical thing? Why shouldn't regional directors be elected by the rank and file?
Right.
Why shouldn't that's why shouldn't the members elect the business agents, all the business agents?
And there was a group called TDU that once stood for all that. Now they've been totally co-opted by Sean O'Brien, and they're singing whatever song he wants them to sing, and they're pretty much funded by him because they send all their members there on the union dime to his conventions, so to their convention. But
that was supposed to be a rank and file organization fighting for rank and file control of the Teamsters Union.
Well, it looks, that's funny because I've been going to those conventions for years, and this one didn't feel. It felt more like going to. If anybody's ever been, we have Unity Conference, Women's Conference, all these different conferences, but usually the folks that go to those conferences are, the in the loop people in a local union that are being rewarded for their loyalty, right? And that's what this looked like. The 5 vice presidents that were part of this thing, they sent lots of people from their locals to fund this thing. And when I started going there, these were people that were, odd, cut out of the mix people in their locals because they were outspoken. These were people that spent their own money to get there, and 3 and 4 of them would stay in a room to be able to do it because they couldn't afford it. And so it's not the same now. And they struck down a resolution as a hostile resolution that basically said we should be working with other unions. So,
this whole idea of the hell with the rest of the labor movement, it sounds like Trump, the hell with the rest of the world, we'll do our own thing. it's the same methodology that working people should not unite as a class, as all working people, but we can be on our own. This idea that it's us against the world, except when it comes to Trump, we'll unite with Trump.
Right. Who's always been loyal to just about anybody that's been around him. Right.
And
yeah, 1.25 million members in the Teamsters, and that's the number. It's not 1.3. It's 1.25 million, and it's down 500,000 from several years ago. But we're not a big enough number to make a difference, and I think the problem the labor movement makes, and guys like Sean O'Brien who feel like they're so powerful that the Teamsters are like these bully bad boys. You're living in a fantasy land. What we're up against now is wealth and fascism that's directed at the working class. These people don't believe we deserve to exist in a manner that we're striving for. And I say striving because I think most people are not living the standard. When I was a kid, my dad was a sergeant in the Army. My mom didn't work. Now, we weren't wealthy. We had a 1,700 square foot house and 3 bedrooms, and Dad had bought used cars, but we never missed a meal, and never had to worry about health care. But there are lots of folks now that can only hope to live that lifestyle, let alone a comfortable lifestyle where you can do some things.
And what happened in TDU? Because as you say, and you were a supporter of it, it used to be a rank and file organization. They used to believe in democracy. And apparently at this last convention, they wouldn't even allow one of the candidates who's running for president to even speak at the convention. I mean, here you're calling yourselves Teamster Democratic Union, and you won't let a Teamster, that was Richard Hooker Jr., president of Local 623 in Philadelphia, to speak at the convention and say why he's running for president, and you call yourself Democratic? I mean, what is going on?
Right. Well, it's pretty obvious that the convention was basically, it was about who are they going to endorse, right? So the odd thing was the last election, they waited until a month or two before the election to do this. This time they're doing it a year in advance of the election. And yes, Richard's asked, and they knew Richard had been a candidate for at least 5 or 6 months now. So, the excuse I got from one of the steering committee members, well, this was already on the books. I said, well, okay, well, Brian speaks. What about Richard, right? I mean, it seems like if you want your members to make a decision, you want them to see all the candidates. So,
you think they were afraid of Richard even speaking at the convention?
I think they were. I think here, it's unfortunate, but I think they completely lost their way. They're not the two guys that run the show there. I use this analogy. It's interesting because they used to have an office in Detroit, which is famously called the Plywood Palace, and right next to a strip joint, and really rough part. I think it's in Dearborn, Michigan. This place is rough, right? But and then the place that they had in Brooklyn was in a basement that was cold most of the time. The heat didn't work half of the time, and now they've got a glassed-in, beautiful building in Brooklyn, and it's because of all the monies that come in their show, all the contributions they're getting from these O'Brien VPs and supporters. So it's not a grassroots organization when you're funded by locals of vice presidents. It's not. Your funding is pretty transparent. You won't share your financials, but if I go to the show, I could figure it out pretty quick.
And Ken Paff is one of the founders of Teamsters for Democratic Union. Apparently, he was unhappy in the last election that they supported, that the Teamsters were supporting Trump, basically. And he set up a group, Teamsters for Democrats, or Teamsters for, Harris.
Harris, I think it was, yeah.
I mean, he did that, and yet he's part of also the leadership of Labor Notes. He has a nonprofit foundation. They recently supported the shutdown of UAWD, Unite All Workers for Democracy, in the UAW. Was he at the TDU convention?
He's still the puppet master. You know, he still runs it. He's David Levine's his number two, so the two of them still run the show. They got a steering committee, but I don't know that the steering committee, the iron, the sort of the steering committee is much different than the GEB. No one strays, no one speaks out. They're banning people.
There are no dissident voices.
No, and they're banning
calls
people.
Itself democratic.
I can understand them maybe disbanding me because I've been outspoken. I don't really care. But like the Teamster mobilized folks who are young, energetic, and militant, right? They've all been banned. So, one of the interesting things was we were all there and stayed at the hotel so we could mingle and talk to our our fellow Teamsters, my members, by the way. And, lo and behold, they called the police on us for hand billing and saying we can't do it, but here they are hand billing, so it's like, it's just, and of course we had a little demonstration the night that O'Brien came in, because he deserved a demonstration. We shouldn't be endorsing a fascist. He's aligned himself. Let's be real, and a lot of people may not like that word, but concrete is concrete and a fascist is a fascist. And when you support people like Donald Trump, you're a fascist.
But they seem to have ignored that.
Advance. Look, the bottom line, and we took a position. I represent 1.3 million working men and women in this country for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. We took a position 3 weeks ago. Pass a clean CR, get to the table, negotiate a deal. Do not put working people in the middle of a problem they should not be in there. And we got to think about the families that are going to be affected. Think about when you have to tell your son or daughter they can't play sports because you're not getting paid. Think about when you can't pay your mortgage. Think about when you can't pay your tuition. Put the politics aside, get to the table, negotiate a deal, pass a clean CR right now, and then figure out the problems moving forward. And I want to thank the air traffic controllers. I want to thank the aviation administration for all their hard work and sacrifice they make. And look, security and safety of the airlines is paramount. Let's not compromise the safety and security. Pass a clean CR. Thank you.
Labor Notes, for example, which invited TDU to participate in the last Labor Notes convention as a speaker. They work with Ken Paff. They're part of Labor Notes. Why has Labor Notes gone along with this group supporting the fascists?
Well, Steve, I think we know the answer to that, and it's troubling because when you run with people of principle, or when you suspect they're people of principle with moral fiber, and that they stand for something, and then you find out that old adage that it's always about the money. It's sad. It's disheartening. And I will say this: I saw a lot of old Teamsters that were always there for TDU for the right reasons. So I don't want to broad brush the whole group. What I'm saying is the leadership and the direction is not that of its true founders. By the way, the two original founders before Ken Paff ever got on the scene, Mel Packer and Dan Labat's, part of a letter that we all wrote, 10 of us, to express our displeasure with TDU. So that they know what we are or were, and to be kidnapped and co-opted by Sean O'Brien is terrible, because that movement did a lot of good, and we need dissent. It never ends with an election. There's always, as soon as you elect somebody, you got to start fighting them. That's just the way it works. But if you're gonna, you got to be independent to do the job. If money's gonna buy you off, then we're wasting our time.
But isn't that really the nature of most unions in the United States? Business unionism, where it's a business, and you have union officials they've got families that come in. Their families are working for the union. I mean, it's relatives are working for the union. It's cronyism. It's systemic corruption. If you have it's run as a business rather than an organization for workers. I mean, isn't that ideology of the way the unions operate a problem for the unions?
Well, I think the other thing, I 100% agree with everything you just said, and I think the nepotism inside the union, the bragging amongst the leadership that I'm a third generation Teamster and my father was this and that. Well, you know what? We've got a lot of leadership. We got lawyers running locals. We got lawyers on the general executive board. So that's not rank and file. That's not, and then, guys, one of those charges out west is $1,200 bottles of wine. You're not, like I get it if you're going out and you're doing union business that you can buy your meal on the credit card. But frankly, I'll tell you something. Frankly, we shouldn't, and I will give Sean credit for this. And I think it had to do with this thing out west. He finally decided, oh, we're not going to buy alcohol. I don't think it because he got religion, but we're not going to buy alcohol on a credit card anymore. Our members don't need to be getting you drunk, and a reasonable meal, right? Not $150 a night limit on a meal.
Ed, are you hopeful that workers are going to wake up, that they are going to start getting active? I mean, most workers are not active in the unions. They don't go to meetings. Most workers are unaware of how their union operates. And a lot of them are pissed off and alienated from their unions. They don't see their union as an organization that's really going to stand up and fight for them in many, many workplaces.
It's really sad. And it's been the slow erosion. That's why when you look at the voting totals in the last international election, I think it was a little over, right at 13%. Locals, I'm starting to see, the 10 and 12% levels. When you see those numbers, it tells me that there's no interest. That people don't believe in their leadership anymore, and a lot of guys are, they're paying their dues because they're afraid that if they don't, they won't get represented. This is in a right to work state. But even then, out on the gates talking to workers all over the country, constantly hear the complaint about the local union. If we're not educating our membership, and look, sometimes you have to tell people what they don't want to hear, and you might lose your job for it. But that mindset doesn't exist in the majority of the labor movement. And back to your point, the multiple salaries. When you start making $300,000 and $400,000 a year, your hands get real soft, and you're not in touch with people.
Well, not only that, you could use that money to hire organizers. You could use that money to do real education with the rank and file. It's not just the Teamsters. Many unions, their members don't know their own history.
Right.
They don't know their history because the history is embarrassing to the present leadership.
Right.
They're afraid of how the unions really were built in this country. That is a fear.
Well, and I drew a lot of joy from seeing what happened in New York City, and I'm hoping, because back to your thing about history, like the socialist and underpinnings of the labor movement were always there, right? I mean, from the very beginning. I mean, going across the ocean, they were always there, and I'm hoping that at some point people actually try to figure out what the word means and quit listening to right-wing media and in New York City, which is, it's progressive. We're starting to see a crack because people are losing. You can't live in New York City on a working person's salary. It's getting harder and harder, and that's spreading. It's not just New York City now. I live in a part of Texas that's booming right now, but the wages here don't keep up with the housing costs.
And of course, immigrants who built this country are being attacked now. I mean, the immigrants build the construction. They do the work. They're doing the work of this country, and yet they're being targeted. They're being terrorized. I mean, imagine that. The people who do the work in your community. When I heard that Trump, and taking over the National Guard in California, was using National Guard helicopters to chase farm workers off the field.
Right.
The farm workers who do the work of producing food for us in this country and around the world are being chased off the fields with helicopters.
It's brutality. It's unconscionable. And you know, we've talked about this again. If you call yourself a Christian, really, check out your book, man. Check out your book, read it.
And I think that people are waking up. People are angry. I mean, I think that's why Brandon Johnson called for a general strike. That's why Sarah Nelson, the president of the airline flight attendants and the CWA, has called for a general strike. It seems that basically Trump and this government are provoking people and the labor movement to unite and say enough is enough. And, you know, the airlines, I mean, it's taken time, but maybe they should just close down and say, let's negotiate after they're closed down. If the workers do that, they've got the power. And I think that's what really they're afraid of. They're afraid of the workers of this country realizing the power they have collectively, because when that happens, everything's going to change.
Right. I mean, you know, that old adage, labor is capital. And until you understand that, the full impact of that, you can't take advantage of it. You have to know, you know, and I think, you know, in my lifetime, one of the most inspiring moments was in West Virginia and Oklahoma, of all places, where teachers didn't have, you know, the right to collective bargaining, and they walked out anyway. And you know, I remember one of the speakers at a labor notes convention said, "Well, who are you going to replace us with?" They knew the value of their labor. I mean, you know, you don't just grab a bunch of teachers. My wife's a teacher. You know, she's got decades of experience. I mean, you know, come on, man.
And I think that education, that history, that knowledge is what we all need in this country, in this world, to really understand the situation we're in and how to get out of the problems that we face. So I want to thank you for joining us. We've been talking with John Palmer, International Vice President of Teamsters, for all Teamsters, and talking about the crisis in the Teamsters, the crisis in labor, and the dangers that working people face and all of us face. So thanks for joining us.
Certainly. It's good to be here, Steve.